of Psalms calls God a rock 19 times. Why? What does that mean? Well, it's not hard to figure out why the Bible would call God a rock when we look at the way we experience rocks in the wilderness. The idea of God being a rock, we can see, when we look at rocks, we see they're hard, and we get the idea of strength and the Almighty or everlasting. These are things that God is, that rocks stand for as a metaphor. And I want to talk about this metaphor of God being a rock because sometimes we as men, we want to be a rock or admire that quality that guy's a rock in another man. Right? And sometimes that's an appropriate metaphor for things about a man being strong or just solid in their character. But one of the manliest men who ever lived was David, King David of ancient Israel. And 12 of the 19 times that this book of Psalms called God a rock, it's David calling God a rock. And if you study the life of David, you'll know that the fact he called God a rock is very significant because he was a victorious warrior, conquering king. But yet this victorious warrior, conquering king didn't call himself a rock. He called God his rock. In Psalm 18:2, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I mean, any good preacher could stay there all day, but we're just going to take a look at just a few things real quick as we come to an end of our time. First, he calls God a fortress. And again, even right there, that's so rich. We can pull so much out of that alone. But think of what a fortress means to a soldier or someone in distress. Then he calls God his deliverer. With all his talents and warrior skills, David didn't rely on himself, he relied on God and called God his deliverer. We can learn a lot from David as to who we need to rely on. He calls God his refuge. This brave and courageous man, someone I always admired for his faith, was willing to admit he needs a place to go to. His place is God. His refuge is in God. And we need to find a refuge sometimes. Maybe all the time. And we need to find it in God. And we talk, a lot of times as men, we don't want to admit that we need that refuge. But you know what? If it's good enough for David, the ultimate warrior, it's good enough for me. Two final words that he mentions. God is his salvation and his stronghold. My stronghold refers to some position an army possesses, especially back in ancient times, that would be really difficult to take because it was so fortified, so well fortified naturally, and just what the army did to it. And finally, he says, God is my salvation. Now, God is not only our salvation for eternity, when we put our trust in him and repent and follow after him, but he's also our salvation here and now, when life brings us problems, brings troubles, and we feel overwhelmed. When we get in trouble or when that overwhelming feeling comes on us, we need to call on God. And sometimes that's hard to do, but ultimately that's the best thing to do, is to call on God. One more story here, and then I'll have my conclusion. But this is Longs Peak in Rocky Mountain National Park. Everybody familiar with Rocky Mountain or Longs Peak? Longs Peak is the highest mountain in the park. And I took this picture on Memorial Day a few years back. Nice weather on Memorial Day there. And I was on another side of another mountain, going up another mountain when I took it. It was called Twin Sisters. They were about 3,000 feet lower than Longs Peak, so the weather wasn't quite as bad. But on the trail I was on, it was snowing. This is a picture of that trail. And it was light flurries here. You can't really see them in the picture, but you can see there's snow on the trail. And it wasn't too bad until I got to the tree line. When I made it to the tree line, the wind was really whipping along, and some of the trail was just covered with ice. You couldn't even walk on it. I had to go around. There was still snow because the winter ends late in the mountains, and some of it was melting, so you wouldn't even want to walk on it because you would just slide right off of it. So I had to go around it. And it was so cold that, and is anybody here familiar with a camelback? Those bladders you wear on your back, and it has a hose that comes over. And I had to keep drinking my water like every 5 minutes because the hose was freezing. So every time I'd suck in, I'd get slush, and I'd suck into that slush was gone, and I know that above the tree line, in a lot of spots there, the wind would just funnel down. And it was windy it was very windy, but sometimes that wind would come down, I don't know how fast, down these alleys or whatever on the mountainside. And I would hear it coming. And I knew I had to get out of the way. And I went and I saw the closest big rock ahead of me, and I'd get behind that rock. And the wind would blow, and it would blow it. It's kind of like Weather Channel, when you see those guys out there with doing the weather and hurricane, their jackets all shaking like this, and all that. And it sounds just like that. And that's what it was for me. And I was just hiding behind a rock. And then I'd listen, and the wind would stop, and I'd walk again. And then I'd hear the wind coming down another alley or tunnel on the side of this mountain, and I'd run to the next rock, and I'd get back down it, and I'd hide. The wind again and do it all over again. But that rock was my fortress, and my deliverer, and my shelter, my refuge from that wind, just like God is for us. And eventually I got to the top of the mountain. The wind wasn't as bad up there because it wasn't being funneled anymore. But it's great to stand on that rock around top of the mountain. Anybody ever climbed a mountain before? You get up there, and it's just so solid. You're up on top of the mountain. It's a great feeling. Well, God is a rock you can stand on. Finally, now I just want to kind of look back